sa Russia, binagsakan ng malaking icicle sa daan.
Buti na lang, may mga nakakita sa insidente at dinala sila sa ospital. Ang kondisyon na mag-ina ating sisilipin mula sa balitang ibabahagi maya-maya. Magandang gabi, ako po si Ricky Mathay.
Ako si Nina Richie Alago Flores. Ito ang mata ng Agila International para naman sa mga headlines ngayong araw ng Martes.
Philippine Navy naispatan ang 200 at 60 Chinese ships sa ilang features ng West Philippine Sea nitong Pebrero.
Pilipinas umalma sa iniulat ng isang Chinese media na umano'y polluting activities sa Ayungin Shoal.
Pangulong Donald Trump hininto na ang US military aid sa Ukraine.
2 patay at 11 sugatan sa pang-aararo ng kotse sa Mannheim, Germany.
At 2025 Mobile World Congress umarangkada na sa Espanya. Naispatan ng Philippine Navy ang 200 at 60 Chinese vessels sa ilang features ng West Philippine Sea o WPS itong buwan ng Pebrero.
Kinumpirma ni Philippine Navy spokesperson for the West Philippine Sea, Rear Admiral Roy Vincent Trinidad, na 9 sa mga ito ay namataan malapit sa Baho de Masinloc at 7 sa mga ito ay nasa Ayungin Shoal. Idiniin naman ng Armed Forces of the Philippines na ang patuloy na iligal na presensya ng mga barko ng China sa West Philippine Sea ay tahasang pagbabaliwala sa 2016 Arbitral Tribunal ruling na ipinagkaloob sa Pilipinas. Anila, ito rin ang paglabag ng China sa soberanya at sovereign rights ng Pilipinas sa maritime domain nito. Sa kabila nito, dinipensahan naman ng Beijing ang kanilang presensya sa exclusive economic zone ng Pilipinas at sinabing bahagi ito ng South China Sea. Giit ni Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Guo Jiakun, ang interes at soberanya ng Beijing sa South China Sea ay nakabatay sa kasaysayan at sa international law. Nanawagan din si Guo sa Pilipinas na itigil na nito umano ang mga provokasyon sa naturang katubigan. Anya, lumilikha umano ito ng destabilisasyon sa Asia-Pacific region.
Sa kaugnay pong balita, nilinaw ng Philippine Navy na hindi totoo ang iniulat ng isang Chinese media na nagsisimula ng polusyon ang BRP Sierra Madre sa Ayungin Shoal. Sinabi ni Philippine Navy Rear Admiral Roy Vincent Trinidad, ang napaulat na usok mula sa Philippine warship ay mula sa fire drills na isinasagawa ng mga sundalo roon. Anya, hindi ito pagsusunog ng mga waste materials ng BRP Sierra Madre katulad ng alegasyon ng Chinese media. Giit pa ni Tariela, ang isinasagawang aktibidad ng mga sundalo sa Ayungin Shoal ay walang pinsalang idinulot sa kapaligiran. Paliwanag ng Philippine Navy official, combustible material ang ginamit ng mga sundalo at natangay lamang ang usok nito na malakas na ihip ng hangin. Naniniwala naman si Tariela na ang mga kahina-hinalang paratang ng Beijing ay bahagi ng mapanlinlang na pahayag ng Chinese Communist Party at inaatake nito ang information domain ng Pilipinas.
Isang search and rescue operation ang inilunsad ng Philippine Air Force matapos mawala ang isang FA-50 fighter jet nito na nagsasagawa ng tactical night operations kagabi kasama ang iba pang fighter jets. Ayon sa inisyal na ulat, biglang naputol ang komunikasyon ng FA fighter jets bago ito dumating sa target area. Sinubukan ng ibang fighter jets na maka-establish ng komunikasyon sa piloto ng FA aircraft, ngunit bigo silang makontak ito.
The Philippine Air Force is conducting extensive and thorough search operations utilizing all available resources to locate the missing jet fighter aircraft. Our primary concern right now is the safe return of our aircrew.
Paliwanag ng Air Force, itong unang pagkakataon na nakaranas sila ng ganitong insidente sa kanilang mga FA-50 jet. Umaasa pa rin ng Air Force na matutunto nila ang nawawalang fighter jet, lalo na't may personal na locator beacons naman daw ang dalawang piloto na sakay ng jet.
We are hopeful of locating them and the aircraft soon and ask you to join us in prayer during this critical time. Further details will be provided once they are available.
Mahigit 76% na ng target ng balutang dapat maimprenta para sa May 12 polls ang naabot ng COMELEC nitong March 3, 2025. Ayon sa poll body, nasa 53,894,129 na balota na ang tapos na nilang maimprenta. Ibig pong sabihin, nasa 16 million na balota na lamang ang kailangan ng COMELEC na dapat maimprenta bago ang April 14 na deadline nito. Kailangan kasing makapag-imprenta ang COMELEC ng kabuoang 72 million na balota para sa midterm polls matapos ang naging aberya sa printing nito noong buwan ng Enero. Sa kabila nito ay kumpiyansa ang poll body na maaaring matapos nila ang pag-imprenta ng mga balota sa March 19.
Tinamaan ng matinding heat wave ang Metro Manila ngayong pagsisimula ng tag-init sa Pilipinas. Kaugnay nito ay naglabas ang pag-asa na advisory hinggil sa heat index sa Metro Manila na maaaring pumalo sa danger levels. Dahil rito ay nagsuspindi na ng mga pasok ang mga pribado at pampublikong paaralan sa Manila, Pasay, Malabon, Las Piñas at Parañaque. Nagkaroon naman ng early dismissal morning classes ang Marikina dahil rin sa nararanasang matinding init ngayong panahon.
At dahil nga unti-unti nang umiinit ang temperatura sa Pilipinas dahil sa papalapit na summer season, ay inabisuhan ng Department of Health o DOH ang publiko laban sa mga heat-related illnesses. Partikular na tinukoy ng Health Department na sakit ay ang heat cramps, heat exhaustion at heat stroke. Anila, ang heat cramps at heat exhaustion ay may mga sintomas katulad ng pagkapagod, pagkahilo, pananakit ng ulo at pagsusuka. Samantala, ang matagal na pagkababad sa initan ay nagpapataas naman ng posibilidad ng heat stroke. Ayon kay Health Assistant Secretary Albert Domingo, seryosong kondisyon ang heat stroke dahil maaaring mawala ng malay o kaya mag-seizure pa ang isang pasyente. At sa malalang pagkakataon ay maaaring ikamatay ito ng tao kung hindi agad maaagapan. Kaya payo naman ni Domingo sa publiko, palagi ang sumubaybay sa mga ulat ng pag-asa ukol sa lagay ng temperatura ng bansa.
Umapela ang Department of Labor and Employment o DOLE sa mga pribadong kumpanya na gumawa ng mga hakbang upang protektahan ang kalusugan at kaligtasan ng mga empleyado. Kasunod ito ng anunsyo ng pag-asa na nasa transition stage na ang klima ng Pilipinas patungo sa dry season na siyang magdudulot naman ng mataas na heat index. Nagbabala ang pag-asa na posibleng pumalo sa 27 hanggang 46 degrees Celsius ang heat index sa maraming rehiyon sa bansa. Dahil rito, sinabi ni Labor Secretary Bienvenido Laguesma na kahit hindi pa opisyal na nagsisimula ang summer season, ay mas mahusay pa rin ang magkaroon ng proactive at preventive measures kaysa sa reactive acts. Kabilang sa mga ito ay ang pagkakaroon ng epektibong ventilation at heat insulation sa lahat ng lugar na may manggagawa. Dapat ring matiyakan niya na may maayos na break o lugar na maaaring gawing recovery area ng mga empleyado laban sa heat exposure. Hinikayat din ang mga kumpanya na magbigay ng temperature-appropriate uniform at personal protective equipment gaya ng mga sombrero, goggles na may proteksyon laban sa ultraviolet rays at komportabling t-shirt na may mahabang manggas at gawa sa light materials. Kailangan din anya magbigay ng libre at sapat na inuming tubig ang mga kumpanya. Ito ay upang maiwasan ang anumang insidente na makaaapekto hindi lamang sa mga manggagawa kundi sa operasyon ng mismong kumpanya. Dagdag ng DOLE, mainam na magsagawa ng workplace assessment, information at advocacy campaigns ang mga kumpanya kung paanong matutugunan ang heat stress at health emergencies.
Wala namang donasyon na galing sa umano'y Chinese spies na tuwirang tinanggap ng Tarlac Police Station. Yan po ay batay sa initial record check na ginawa ng Philippine National Police o PNP ayon kay Police Region 3 Chief Police Brigadier General Jean Fajardo. Nagtanong din si Fajardo sa Directorate for Logistics at kinumpirmaan niya nito na walang record na magpapahiwatig na minatanggap nga ang PNP at sino man sa mga unit nito mula mismo sa grupo ng mga umano'y espiya ng China. Kung mayroon mang donasyon na natanggap, ang PNP ay galing ito sa City Government of Manila. Noong nakarang Biyernes ay lumabas ang ilang balitang ang 4 na Chinese nationals na hinihinalang espiya ay nagbigaw umano ng donasyon na cash at equipment sa PNP at sa isang local government unit.
Susunod, China hahanapan ng solusyon ang krisis sa Ukraine.
Ukraine rare mineral deal, sapat na nga ba?
At US President Donald Trump nais magbukas ng free trade deal kasama ang Argentina. Ang mga balitang yan at iba pa sa pagbabalik ng Mata na Agila International.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka na mangamba. Sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. Mailalabas natin ang aking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa new era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
Nangako ang China na tutulong ito sa paghahanap ng isang political solution sa krisis sa Ukraine. Sinabi ni Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesman Lin Jian na makikibahagi rin ang Beijing sa pagsulong ng kapayapaan sa Kiev at sinusuportahan din anya ng China ang lahat ng pagsisikap na maayos na ang naturang krisis.
中方将继续致力于为政治解决乌克兰危机、实现和平发挥建设性作用。中国不是乌克兰危机的制造者，也不是当事方。我们支持一切有利于和平解决危机的努力，期待各当事方找到能够照顾彼此关切、可持续和持久的解决方案。
Pinagti ng Estados Unidos ang political and military provocations nito laban sa North Korea. Yan ang paniniwala ni Kim Yo-jong, ang kapatid ni North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Sa isang talumpati, kinastigan ni Yo-jong ang pagdating ng USS Carl Vinson sa Busan, South Korea noong linggo. Ito raw ay isang policy of confrontation ng Estados Unidos sa North Korea na nagsusulong umano ng masamang patakaran ng dating administrasyon ng US na ipinagpapatuloy ng Trump administration. Depensa naman ng Ministry of Defense ng South Korea, ang pahayag ni Kim Yo-jong ay walang iba kundi isa umanong pagdadahilan na naglalayong bigyang katwiran ang nuclear missile development ng Nokor.
Samut-saring reaksyon ang inani ng salpukan ni Zelensky, Trump at Vance noong Biyernes sa White House. Para sa marami, panahon na upang ituon ng Ukraine ang atensyon nito sa Europa at doon humingi ng suporta. Hindi naman bigo si Zelensky sa European countries. Anila, maaasahan ng Kiev ang suporta ng mga ito. Si NJ de Guzman para sa report.
Nagising sa matalas na katotohanan ang mga taga-Ukraine noong Sabado matapos ang salpukan ng leader nitong si Pangulong Vladimir Zelensky at US President Donald Trump at VP nitong si J.D. Vance. Sumabog ang iringan sa mga leader dahil sa magkaibang pananaw kung paano wawakasan ang 3 taong giyera ng Ukraine at Russia. Hanap ni Zelensky ang garantihang pansiguridad mula sa administrasyong Trump na tila humilig na sa diplomasya sa Russia. Marami sa Ukrainians ang nanindigan para sa kanilang Pangulo. Ito ay sa kabila ng pagkadismaya sa tila lumalabong suporta ng Washington sa Kyiv. Ayon kay Kyiv resident Lyudmila Stetsovich, hindi lalagda ang Pangulo nila kung hindi tiyak ang seguridad ng bansa.
Не склалася розмова. Ще таке враження, це вони його так продавлювали. Ну, Зеленський якийсь має супротив. Значить, немає безпеки нам гарантії, розумієте? Якби були, він підписав. Навіщо нам зараз підписати, віддати те, що вони хочуть, а потім пройде 2-3 роки і знову Росія на нас нападе. І буде сильнішою, зробить висновки над своїми помилками. Я вважаю це так. От. Тому подивимося, що з чого вийде. Сподіваюся, якийсь компроміс буде в цьому поводу.
Para naman kay Ella Kazantseva ng Kostiantynivka, sinubukan ni Zelensky na ipaliwanag ang kanilang sitwasyon.
Честно, нашего президента, я его выдержки просто, я не знаю. На его месте я бы, наверное, тоже все бы разгромила, там, как они вели себя. Я поддерживаю, конечно, Зеленского, если честно. Вот это мое мнение. Я не знаю, как он даже выдержал в такой обстановке. Он молодец все равно. Мне кажется, по-другому нельзя было. Потому что американцы, они не знают реальной ситуации, что у нас творится. Вот реально они не понимают. У них все так, все облачно, все красиво. Вот как бы, а им невозможно доказать. Он пытался им рассказать, доказать. Это должны они только увидеть это все.
Dinipensahan ng iba ang suot ni Zelensky sa pakikipagpulong na tila inatake ng White House bilang kawalan ng pagpapahalaga sa lugar at okasyon.
Яка різниця, в чому справа взагалі, що за костюм, що людина прекрасна, він прекрасно виглядає, ми воююча країна. Було б дивно навіть для мене, якщо б він прийшов, для мене це виглядає, я повністю підтримую Володимира в цьому плані.
Samantala, nagpahayag ang Ukrainians ng kanilang pag-asa na sa gitna ng pangyayaring ito, lalong patitindihin ng mga kaalyado ng Ukraine sa Europe ang suportang militar at politikal nito sa Kyiv sakaling tumigil na ang US sa pagtulong.
Буде важко, але все буде добре. Доля країни – це перемога, це вихід як мінімум на кордони 22-го року хоча б. А так все буде ок. І Європа включиться, а потім вже і Америка включиться.
Ngunit hindi maikakaila na malaking bagay ang tulong ng US kung mayroon man.
Підтримка Америки дуже важна для нас. Дуже важна. Несмотря на то, что мы и так сильные ребята, как бы наши ребята, но підтримка вору вже потрібна. Обов'язково.
Sa ibang bahagi ng Europe, nagpahayag rin ng kani-kanilang reaksyon ukol sa iringan sa White House ang mga residente. Ayon kay Francisco Martinez ng Spain, tila hindi na maikakaila na Russia na ang sinusuportahan ng US. Anya, mukhang na kay Putin na ang tagumpay.
Not having this support from US, of course, we are not capable enough in Europe alone. So, well, we don't know what will happen. I mean, I think the situation for Ukraine is quite difficult now. Putin has the support from US, so we don't know what will happen. Probably they will get a very bad treat. So, and probably Putin will win the war at the end.
Ayon naman kay Susan Frey ng Germany, mahihirapan na ang Ukraine ngayong ang lumalarong magkasama na ay si Trump at Putin.
Trump and Putin is the leader of the game. I think it would be difficult for Ukraine.
Sa kaugnay na balita, nagbigay rin ng opinyon si German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock ukol sa pangyayari. Anya, nagsimula na ang karumal-dumal na panahon. Nanindigan ito sa suporta ng Germany para sa Ukraine.
Der gestrige Abend hat unterstrichen, eine neue Zeit der Ruchlosigkeit hat begonnen. Eine ruchlose Zeit, in der wir die regelbasierte internationale Ordnung und die Stärke des Rechts mehr denn je gegen die Macht der Stärkeren verteidigen müssen. Denn sonst kann kein freies Land mehr ruhig schlafen, das einen stärkeren Nachbarn hat.
Nanawagan rin si Baerbock sa German members ng parlamento upang maglaan ng karagdagang 3 billion euros o $3.1 billion na tulong para sa Ukraine. Binigyan diin ni Baerbock na naninindigan pa rin ang Berlin kasama ng Kyiv. Sa pagtatapos ng kanyang pahayag, sinabi nito ang mga katagang Slava Ukraini o purihin ng Ukraine at long live Europe. NJ De Guzman, Washington DC para sa Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Nagbabala po sa United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres na ang pagtigil ng Estados Unidos sa pagbibigay nito ng foreign assistance ay ikapapahamak ng maraming mahihinang bansa sa mundo. Ana Kui para sa balitang yan.
Nagpahayag ng matinding pagkabahala si UN Chief Antonio Guterres ukol sa malalaking foreign aid cuts ng US. Ani Guterres, pahamak ang dulot ng putol-tulong na ito ng US, lalo na sa mahinang populasyon ng mundo.
I want to start by expressing my deep concern about information received in the last 48 hours by UN agencies, as well as many humanitarian and development NGOs, regarding severe cuts in funding by the United States. The consequences will be especially devastating for vulnerable people around the world.
Nitong nakaraang linggo, inanunsyo ng administrasyon ni Pangulong Donald Trump na puputulin nito ang foreign aid ng bansa. Ito ay matapos pansamantalang ihinto ang assistance upang suriin kung nakaayon ba ang mga proyekto sa America First policy ni Trump.
Now, going through with these cuts will make the world less healthy, less safe, and less prosperous. The reduction of America's humanitarian role and influence will run counter to American interests globally.
Dagdag ni Guterres, nasaid na ang pondong laan sa mga programa sa South Sudan para sa mga tumatakas sa kaguluhan doon. Dahil dito, dumidelikado na ang border doon. Ayon pa kay Guterres, mapipilitang itigil ng UN Office on Drugs and Crime ang marami sa kontra-drogang mga programa nito, kabilang na ang paglaban sa krisis sa fentanyl. Mababawasan din ang mga proyekto ukol sa paglaban sa human trafficking. Tumigil na rin anya ang pondo para sa mga programang laban sa HIV and AIDS, tuberculosis, malaria at iba pa. Pag-asa ni Guterres, sana ay mabago pa ang desisyong ito ng US.
I can only hope that these decisions can be reversed based on more careful reviews, and the same applies to other countries that have recently announced reductions in humanitarian and development aid.
Samantala, tinitiyak naman ni Guterres na bawat ahensya ng UN ay nakahandang magbigay ng impormasyon at katwiran sa mga proyekto ng mga ito. Anya, gagawin ng UN ang lahat upang maipagpatuloy ang pagtulong sa mga nanganganib ang buhay. Ayon sa tagapagsalita ng US State Department, 5,800 sa 6,200 na proyekto ang itinigil ang pondo. Iyan anya ay 92% reduction. Pinutol din ng administrasyon ang halos 30% ng State Department foreign aid-related grants na nagkakahalaga ng $4.4 billion. Ana Cui para sa mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Base sa mga ulat sa Ukraine at ibang opisyal ng White House, ay pinahinto ni US President Donald Trump ang military aid sa Ukraine.
Американську військову допомогу країні зупинено. Як повідомляє CNN, це їм підтвердив представник Білого дому. Мовляв, таким чином Дональд Трамп посилює тиск на Володимира Зеленського після суперечки в овальному кабінеті.
Anya, pansamantalang ititigil at pag-aaralan muna ang kanilang ibibigay na aid para matiyak na ito ay nag-aambag sa isang solusyon. Ayon naman sa isa pang opisyal, sakop ng paghinto ng aid ang lahat ng military equipment na wala pa sa loob ng Ukraine. Saad ng opisyal ng paghinto ng military aid sa Ukraine ay direktang tugon sa kung ano ang naging pananaw ni Trump sa inasal ni Zelensky sa kanilang naging pagpupulong noong nakaraang linggo sa Oval Office na nauwi sa mainit na sagutan. Posible anyang ipagpatuloy ang pagbibigay ng US ng military aid sa Ukraine kung magpapakita si Zelensky ng bagong commitment sa mga negosasyon para wakasan ang gyera sa Ukraine. Ayon kasi sa ilang opisyal, nais ni Trump at kanyang senior aides ng acknowledgement mula kay Zelensky na maaaring sa pamamagitan ng public apology bago magkasundo sa minerals deal o bago magkaroon ng diskusyon sa pagpapatuloy ng military aid. Makikita naman ito bilang parte ng pressure strategy ng Trump administration sa Ukraine.
What do you need to see from President Zelensky to restart these negotiations?
Well, I just think he should be more appreciative because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us because, as you know, that's right there. That's the border.
President, is the Ukraine minerals deal now dead, or can it be revived? What's your...
Well, I'll let you know. We're making a speech. You probably heard about it tomorrow night, so I'll let you know tomorrow night. But no, I don't think so. President Zelensky supposedly made a statement today in AP. I'm not a big fan of AP, so maybe it was an incorrect statement, but he said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time. And he better not be right about that. That's all I'm saying.
Dalawang oil facilities sa Rostov at Samara regions ng Russia ang tinamaan ng drones na galing ng Ukraine. Sinabi ni Rostov Region Governor Yuri Silyusar, nagkaroon ng mga pagsabog sa oil sites. Subalit, mabilis anya nilang naapula ang apoy kaya hindi na ito kumalat sa lungsod. Wala rin anyang nasawi sa insidente. Binanggit din ng opisyal na hindi ito ang unang beses na inatake sila ng drones na galing ng Ukraine. Noong nakaraang buwan ay nagkaroon ng temporary shutdown sa Syzran Oil Refinery dahil sa sunod-sunod na pag-atake ng Kyiv drones. Sa pag-asang makaiwas sa bantang 25% taripa ng Estados Unidos, aktibong tinututukan ng Mexico ang iligal na immigration at drug trafficking sa border nito sa US. Narito po report ni Leslie Gumarang.
Noong Huwebes, saglit na nakapasok muli sa headquarters ng USAID ang mga empleyadong tinanggal na sa trabaho. Ito ay upang kolektahin nila ang kani-kanilang personal na gamit at linisin ang mga mesa. Ito ay isang araw matapos ipahayag ng administrasyon ni Pangulong Donald Trump na sisibakin na nito ang 70% ng mga kontrata ng ahensya. Habang lumalabas ang mga empleyado, bit-bit ang mga kahon laman ang kanilang mga gamit, pinalakpakan sila ng mga taga-suporta sa labas ng tanggapan. Sa isang memo, nakasaad na 15 minuto lamang ang kanilang maaaring ipaglagi upang kolektahin ang mga gamit. Ibinahagi ng mga empleyadong ngayon ay wala ng trabaho ang kanilang saloobin.
It's a legacy that, American taxpayers should be proud of. Let's not forget that. Historically, up until now, it's been less than 1% of the budget. And, come on, talk to the average American. Do they want to see people dying because of assistance cut off? There would have been a very clear and particular way to reform the foreign assistance sector in this country, to reform USAID. And frankly, a lot of people sort of wanted to see that. This could have been done in a much more genuine and relevant way, and it really wasn't.
We're cutting off millions of children from food to save ourselves like pennies on the dollar. You know, again, less than 1% of our budget. Like, that's not a saving. And this work is literally life and death for some people. So it's not a savings that matters.
Para sa isa pang dating empleyado ng USAID na si Amanda Nataro, nag-aalala siya para sa mga aid recipients na hindi na kumakain ng ilang araw. Umaasa siya na hindi ito maging permanente.
I worry about the people that have gone this many days without food, without medicine, without the humanitarian assistance that we promised them. My hope is that the work isn't abandoned completely.
Noong Enero, ipinag-utos ni Trump ang 3 buwang pagtigil ng foreign aid. Inutusan nito si billionaire at advisor Elon Musk na baklasin ang USAID bilang bahagi ng pagpuksa nito ng walang saysay na paggastos at pang-aabuso ng pondo. Ayon kay Taylor Williamson na dating empleyado ng partner organization ng USAID, walang sinayang na pondo ang ahensya kontra sa paniniwala ni Musk.
USAID is one of the most accountable and transparent parts of the United States government. The Office of the Inspector General has done numerous audits and has found no fraud, no waste. What Elon Musk thinks is that he has found things he disagrees with, and that's fine. People in this building have spent 65 years responding to what the president wants, have spent 65 years responding to the needs that the president says.
Ani Williamson, malungkot ang araw na ito.
It's a sad day when the American government decides that American values are no longer important, that it's no longer of value to export what we believe in to the rest of the world.
Leslie Gumarang para sa mata ng Agila International, Trusted, Connected, On Point.
Nakaabang ang bansang Mexico sakaling magkatotoo ang bantang 25% taripa ng Estados Unidos sa mga in-import nitong produkto. Ayon sa Pangulo ng Mexico, anuman ang kahihinatnan ng sitwasyon, may nakahanda na silang plano laban sa Trump tariffs. Si Yolanda Aspiras para sa balita.
Ngayong Martes, malalaman kung itutuloy ng US ang dagdag taripa nito sa Mexico. Bilang tugon, sinabi ni Pangulong Claudia Sheinbaum, may backup plan sila sakaling ipatupad na nga ang taripa. Ani Sheinbaum, tatalakay nito ang mga detalye ng mga plano ngayong Martes, subalit tiniyak na handa ang Mexicong tumugon sa anumang aksyon ng US.
Las reuniones en Estados Unidos estuvieron muy bien. Hay comunicación permanente con las distintas áreas, tanto seguridad como comercio, y vamos a esperar qué pasa. En esto hay que tener temple, serenidad y paciencia. Y tenemos plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D.
Nakipagpulong ang mga opisyal ng Mexico sa mga katapat nito sa US noong 1 linggo sa Washington. Tinalakay ng mga ito ang trade and security policy sa pagitan ng dalawang bansa, isang subok ng Mexico upang i-delay ang taripa. Dagdag ni Sheinbaum, anuman ang pasya ng US, may katapat na pasya ang Mexico para rito.
Es una decisión que depende del gobierno de Estados Unidos, eso es muy importante. O sea, de nuestra parte, pues hemos estado en comunicación, hemos hecho los acuerdos y las coordinaciones necesarias, pero es una decisión que depende del gobierno de los Estados Unidos, del presidente de los Estados Unidos. Entonces, cualquiera que sea esta decisión, pues nosotros también tomaremos nuestras decisiones. Y hay plan, y hay unidad en México, eso nos fortalece mucho, mucho.
Inakusahan ni Trump ang Mexico at Canada na hindi gumagawa ng sapat upang supili ng pagpasok ng synthetic drugs, tulad ng fentanyl sa US. Gayon din ang pagdating ng mga migrante sa border. Dahil dito nangako si Trump ng dagdag taripa sakaling hindi masolusyonan ang mga isyong ito. Inilarawan ni Sheinbaum na magiliw naman ang pagpupulong na ito sa Washington at sinabing maayos ang pakikipag-ugnayan ng Mexico at US. Yolanda Aspiras para sa Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Sinabi ni US President Donald Trump na posible ang isang free trade agreement kasama ang Argentina. Hanga rin si Trump sa ginagawang trabaho ni Argentinian President Javier Milei sa bansa nito. Para sa Washington leader, isang mahusay na leader si Milei. Ayon naman sa ilang business experts, malinaw ang mga polisiya ni Milei sa Argentina kaya malaki ang naitulong nito para bumangon ang ekonomiya ng bansa.
Sa termination notice ng mga kontrata ni USAID sa buong mundo, nagbabala ang isang eksperto sa South Africa na malaking pinsalang may dudulot nito sa mga buwang paparating. Narito ang report ni Jessica Bautista.
Tumanggap ng termination notices noong Huwebes ang daan-daang health projects sa buong mundo. Kabilang dito ang mga nagbibigay ng life-saving care. Ito ay matapos piliin ng administrasyon ni Pangulong Donald Trump kung alin-aling grants lamang ang nakalinya sa interes nito. Ayon kay Linda Gail Becker ng Desmond Tutu HIV Foundation, disaster ang kahihinatnan ng permanenteng tigil pondong ito ng US.
It is not hyperbole to say that I predict a huge disaster, a walk back on the investment, unless other resources can be found and found urgently. And here I look to our own South African government urgently to say, how do we ensure that we fill the gaps so that lives are not lost, infections are not incurred because we have been caught sleeping at the wheel.
Idinetali ni Becker kung gaano karami ang masasawi dahil sa kawalan ng pondo.
We stand to lose all the investment over the last 25 years if we do not work hard to fill the gaps that this funding freeze is causing. Secondly, we will see lives lost. So in excess of 500,000 unnecessary deaths will occur because of the loss of the funding, and up to 500,000 new infections. So these are modeling studies, they are prone to various assumptions, but just to give the flavor that this is not going to be business as usual.
Ayon kay Yvette Rappel, itinuturing ng kanilang organisasyon na pagdedeklara ito ng Administrasyon Trump ng giyera laban sa karapatan sa kalusugan.
We are deeply concerned about the decision to end USAID today. So we need to remember that the letters that came out said all contracts are ended. The Trump administration, according to our organization, has declared war on the right to health globally, not only in South Africa. We also need to reiterate that in South Africa, healthcare is a human right, and our government has an obligation to ensure that our human right, health right is reached.
Noong Enero, ipinag-utos ni Trump ang 90-day pause sa lahat ng foreign aid habang sinusuri kung naka-align ba ito sa America First foreign policy ng bansa. Karamihan sa pinakamalalaking US-funded HIV/AIDS program sa South Africa ang inabisuhan na hindi na magpapatuloy ang pagpopondo sa mga ito. Jessica Bautista para sa Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Tiniyak ni US Vice President J.D. Vance na bukas ang Estados Unidos kung seryoso si Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky para sa peace talks. Hinikayat din niya ang Europa na sabihin kay Zelensky na ang digmaan sa pagitan ng Russia at Ukraine ay hindi pwedeng panghabang buhay.
Of course, the door is open so long as Zelensky is willing to seriously talk peace. You can't come into the Oval Office or anywhere else and refuse to even discuss the details of a peace deal. Look, this is not going to make anybody happy. The Russians are going to have to give up stuff. The Ukrainians are going to have to give up stuff. You can't come to the Oval Office and say, give us security guarantees. We won't even engage with you about what we're willing to give up. That's been the Ukrainian posture. When that posture changes, as President Trump said, when they're willing to talk peace, I think President Trump will be the first person to pick up the phone.
Susunod, magina sa Russia na bagsakan ng giant icicle.
4,600 katao nilikas sa wildfires sa Japan.
At New York Athletic Commission nais i-overturn ang draw decision ng tank and road fight. Mga detalye po ng mga balita niyan at iba pa mga balita sa pagbabalik ng Mata ng Agila International.
Is quite as simple as it seems. To understand the world better, we need to take a closer look. Experience knowledge. Tomorrow Today.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, hindi sapat na security guarantee ang mineral deal ng Ukraine at ng Estados Unidos. Ang kasunduang ito anya ay hindi makatitiyak na susunod ang Russia sa anumang negosasyong pangkapayapaan. Nanindigan si Starmer na mahalaga na kasama ang Estados Unidos sa anumang kasunduan dahil ang paglahok ng US ay karagdagang depensa at seguridad. Inaresto ng Mannheim Police ang 40 anyos na German national matapos araruhin ito ang mga tao sa daan gamit ang itim nitong SUV. Ayon sa lokal na ulat, 2 ang namatay sa trahedya habang 11 iba pa naman ang sugatan. Sinabi ni Public Prosecutor Romeo Schussler na may nakalap silang konkretong ebidensya na may iniindang psychological illness ang attacker. Anya, masusing pinasok ng pulisya ang tahanan ng suspect para kumalap ng patotoo sa pagkakakilanlan nito.
Am Anfang war es noch nicht klar, ob es sich um einen extremistischen Täter handelt oder ob ein politisches Motiv vorliegt. Nach bisherigen Erkenntnissen können wir ausschließen, dass es sich um eine politisch motivierte Tat handelt. Wir haben vielmehr konkrete Anhaltspunkte auf eine psychische Erkrankung des Täters. Deswegen konzentrieren sich die Ermittlungen insoweit auf diesen Aspekt. Wir haben dann relativ schnell einen Durchsuchungsbeschluss für die Wohnung des Täters erwirkt. Dieser Durchsuchungsbeschluss wurde oder wird noch gerade vollzogen. Und wir versuchen natürlich weitere Erkenntnisse zum Hintergrund und zur Motivationslage des Täters herauszufinden. Der Täter war
einleiten und haben
Sa Russia, hindi akalain ng isang ina na ang tahimik nilang paglalakad ng kanyang anak sa isang kalye ay mauuwi sa isang disgrasya. Bigla na lamang kasing nahulog ang isang giant icicle at saktong sa ulo ng babae ito tumama. Nawala ng malay ang ginang habang umiyak na lamang ang kanyang anak. Itinakbo sa ospital ng Dagestan ang mag-ina at ayon sa mga doktor doon ay walang sugat na natamo ang bata. Subalit patuloy na nagpapagaling ang ina nito dahil napuruhan ng giant icicle sa ulo.
Halos 4,600 residents ang sapilitang inilikas ng lokal na pamahalaan ng Japan dahil po yan sa pagkalat ng wildfires sa isang coastal town malapit sa Ofunato City, Japan. Sa aerial footage ng Japan's Self-Defense Force, kitang-kita na lumalaki pa rin ang apoy sa kabila ng pagsisikap ng mga bombero na mapatay ito. Nasa 2,100 hectares na rin ng lupa ang natutupok, habang isa ang kumpirmadong patay dahil sa sunog. Nagsimula ang wildfire noong February 26, subalit nahihirapan ang fire department na maupula ang sunog dahil sa lakas ng hangin.
Isang aerial video mula sa National Guard ng South Carolina ang trending ngayon sa iba't ibang social media sites. Kinailangan na kasing gumamit ng aircraft ng mga bombero para magtapo ng tubig sa wildfires doon. Ayon sa lokal na media, umabot sa 200 ang sunog sa South Carolina at nahirapan ang mga otoridad na mapatay ang sunog dahil sa lakas ng ihip ng hangin. Nagdeklara na rin si Governor Henry McMaster ng state of emergency. Sa ngayon ay 5 na lamang ang active fires at wala pang napaulat na nasawi roon.
Nag-plead ng guilty sa lahat ng kaso ang gunman na may kagagawa ng trahedya sa Highland Park 4th of July parade shooting. Ayon po sa mga tagalitis, ang aksyong ito ng nasasakdal ay hindi resulta ng anumang plea deal o negosasyon. Chantal Santos po para sa detalye ng balita.
Nag-plead ng guilty ang nasasakdal na si Robert E. Crimo III sa 21 counts ng first-degree murder. 3 para sa bawat isa sa 7 biktimang nasawi dahil sa pamamaril nito noong 2022. Gayon din sa 48 counts ng attempted first-degree murder para sa dese-desen ng nasaktan dahil sa insidente. Ang plea ni Crimo ay pinasok bago magsimula ang paglilitis nito. Ayon kay State Attorney Eric Reinhardt, ang pag-amin na ito ay hindi dahil sa anumang negosasyon o plea deal.
This morning, the shooter in the Highland Park trial pled guilty to 21 counts of first-degree murder and 48 counts of attempted first-degree murder. Let me be clear. This was not a negotiation. This was not a deal. He made a free decision to plead guilty to every single count.
Binigyang diin ni Reinhardt na nakahanda ang mga tagalitis na maglahad ng mga ebidensya laban kay Crimo.
We were prepared to present overwhelming evidence of the defendant's guilt. This happens from time to time in our criminal justice system, in big cases and in small cases. As the defendant gets closer and closer to trial, this has happened before. This will happen again in all size of cases, and we were prepared to present all of our evidence.
Noong 4 ng Hulyo 2022, isang mass shooting ang naganap sa Independence Day Parade sa Highland Park, Illinois, United States. 7 kataong namatay at 48 ang nasaktan. Nagsalita ang isang survivor ng pamamaril na si Ashby Beasley tungkol sa epekto ng guilty plea.
I think it's really important to remember that there were thousands and thousands of people at this parade who ran for their lives, whose children are forever changed, who cannot go on with their daily life, who have spent years in therapy and tried to heal. and that we are not the first community to go through this, and we will not be the last community to go through this. And so while this will fade, not for us, but in the public, it's really important to know that any of us could be any of you, and any family can experience this. And it's on our lawmakers to make changes so that this doesn't happen again to another community.
Ayon kay Reinhardt, ang pag-plead ng guilty ni Crimo ay isang mahalagang hakbang tungo sa hustisya.
Today is about the victims and survivors of the Highland Park July 4th parade shooting. Our community may never heal from the defendant's calculated and heinous actions that destroyed so many lives. But today is an important step towards justice.
Subalit ani Highland Park Mayor Nancy Rodering, mahalagang hakbang man ito. Hindi mabubura ng guilty plea ang sakit na idinulot ng trahedya.
Today's guilty plea is an important step towards justice, but it does not erase the pain. We share our deep appreciation and admiration for Lake County State's Attorney Eric Reinhardt and his entire team for their tireless work to pursue justice on behalf of the Highland Park community.
Chantal Santos para sa mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Nako ay magiging sentimental na naman ang mga millennials ngayong darating na Mayo dahil po pagkatapos ng 2 dekada ay magpapaalam na sa May 5 ang Skype services. Ayon sa Microsoft na siyang nagmamay-ari ng Skype, ang pagsasara ng Skype ay makatutulong sa kumpanya na mag-focus sa Microsoft Teams services. Inilunsad ang Skype noong taong 2003 at sumikat ito dahil ito ang madalas gamitin ng mga tao para sa video calls para kamustahin ang kanilang mga kaanak sa iba't ibang bahagi ng mundo. Kaya lamang ay nahirapan itong sumabay sa mga kakumpetensya nitong Zoom at Facebook at bumaba rin ang bilang ng mga gumagamit ng Skype dahil ang teknolohiyang ito ay hindi gumagana sa smartphones.
Hindi mapigil ang pagsulong ng artificial intelligence o AI sa mundo. Alamin natin kung ano ang reaksyon ng Canadians ukol sa pagkalat ng teknolohiyang ito. Mula sa Toronto, narito si NET25 correspondent Cherry Recorizado para sa balita.
Ang AI o Artificial Intelligence ay patuloy na nagiging bahagi ng pang-araw-araw na buhay. Ayon sa isang survey, kamakailan karamihan sa mga Canadian ay may pag-aalinlangan at naniniwala na ang pagtaas ng gamit ng AI ay nagpapababa ng kredibilidad ng impormasyon. Ang ganitong pananaw ay makikita rin sa tiwala ng mga Canadian sa positibong ambag ng AI sa ekonomiya sa buong bansa. Ayon sa parehong ulat ng Can Trust Index, may mga pagkakaiba sa pananaw ang bawat henerasyon. Mas mataas ang tiwala ng mga millennial at Gen Z na Canadian sa pagiging reliable ng AI. Ayon sa mga nakatatandang mga Canadian na sumali sa survey, may tiwala sila sa mga balitang online, ngunit hindi nila itinuturing na mapagkakatiwalaan ang mga AI language model. Sa kabuuan, mas mataas pa rin ang tiwala nila sa tradisyonal na mapagkukunan ng balita gaya ng dyaryo, telebisyon at radyo. Ayon sa mga eksperto, tanging panahon lamang ang makapagsasabi kung tataas ang tiwala ng publiko sa AI. Sa ngayon, mas nagiging mapanuri ang mga tao at madalas nilang tinitiyak kung totoo ang mga impormasyong nakikita nila online dahil hindi lubusan na nauunawaan ng AI ang komplikadong mga kahulugan at ideya, hindi gaya ng kakayahan ng isang tao. Cherry Recorizado, Toronto, Ontario, para sa NET25 News.
Umarangkada na po nitong Lunes ang 2025 Mobile World Congress sa Barcelona, Spain. Higit sa 3,700 companies mula sa higit 200 bansa ang nakiisa sa taunang Mobile World Congress para itampok ang kanilang flagship products sa publiko. Ilan sa mga kumpanya ang inilabas ang kanilang latest products ay ang kumpanyang Xiaomi. Unang kinumpirma ng Xiaomi na kanilang ilulunsad ang 15 series nito na isang photography-focused flagship phone. Hindi rin patatalo ang Huawei dahil ididisplay naman ito ang ipinagmamalaki ng kumpanyang unang tri-fold phone. At higit pa rito ay kasama rin ang Samsung, Realme, Tecno, TCL at Honor na maglalabas ng kanilang bagong flagship, habang ang Google naman ay pinaniniwalaang ilalabas ang integration sa Gemini AI nito sa Messages application. Dumating naman si Spanish King Felipe VI venue para opisyal na buksan ang nasabing event. Ngayong taon, nakatuon ang Mobile World Congress sa development ng cutting-edge technologies katulad ng 5G at artificial intelligence. Magtatagal ang Mobile World Congress hanggang March 6, araw po yan ng Huwebes.
Kinansela ng SpaceX ang ika-8 test flight ng Starship rocket system dahil sa mga technical issues, kabilang narito ang problema sa Super Heavy booster. Ayon kay Elon Musk, susuriin muna nila ang parehong bahagi ng rocket bago ang sunod na test flight. Noong Enero, biguri ng Flight 7 kung saan sumabog ito sa himpapawid at nagkalat ito ng debris sa Turks at Caicos. Iniimbestigahan naman ng Federal Aviation Administration o FAA ang pangyayari. Layon sana ng Mission 8 ay subukan na muling buhayin ang isang Starship engine para tingnan ang kakayahan nito na magsagawa ng mas mahirap na space missions. Susubukan din ng Starship na magpadala ng mock Starlink satellite sa gitna ng flight path nito bago ito tuluyang bumagsak sa Indian Ocean. Sa kabila ng aberya sa paglunsad ng Starship, ay pinayagan ng FAA na magpatuloy ang flight test ng SpaceX dahil napasa na nila ang environmental safety at iba pang license requirements. Gumawa na ng bagong design ng SpaceX matapos ang pinakahuling bigong test launch nito, kasama na rin ang pag-ayos ng vents at fuel lines para maiwasan ang sunog. Wala pang bagong flight schedule na ibinibigay ang SpaceX. Ang Starship spacecraft ay dinisenyo para maging most powerful and reusable rocket na magagamit sa mga susunod na space mission nito, kabilang ang exploration sa Mars at sa Buwan.
Samantala, pinag-aaralan na ng New York Athletics Commission ang controversial draw decision ng laban ni Gerente Tank Davis at Lamont Roach. Nananatiling WBA lightweight champion si Gerente Tank Davis matapos ang isang controversial na non-call matapos lumuhod si Davis sa 9th round ng kanilang laban. Nangyari ang controversial no-call matapos biglang mapaluhod si Davis habang sumusuntok si Roach. Kaagad naman itong binilangan ng referee, subalit itinigil ito at hinayaan si Davis na bumalik sa kanyang corner. Nagresulta ito sa draw decision na kaagad namang kinwestiyon ng kampo ni Roach, ngunit nabigo ang naturang ahensya sa kanilang pagsisiyasat sa desisyon sa mismong araw ng laban dahil sa umano'y technical issue ng organizers, kung kaya't napilitan naman silang sumang-ayon sa desisyon ng referee. At tandaan, narito po kami para maghatid ng balita saan mang dako ng mundo. Magandang gabi po. Ako po muli si Ricky Matay.
Ako si Nina Richie Alago Flores. Ito ang Mata ng Agila International. Para naman sa mga balitang nanggaling din sa iba't ibang panig ng mundo, hintayin po natin. Ito na si Alma Angeles para sa Mata ng Agila World News. Take it away, Alma.
Thank you, Nina and Ricky. Good evening, everyone. I'm Alma Angeles for NET25 World News. On tonight's headlines. The U.S. has paused military aid to Ukraine, a decision that could have significant consequences for Kiev's ability to defend itself against Russian aggression.
President Trump has been clear that he is focused on peace. We need our partners to be committed to that goal as well. We are pausing and reviewing our aid to ensure that it is contributing to a solution.
President Trump is doubling down on his tariff threats, leaving no room for Canada or Mexico to avoid steep new trade penalties.
The tariff situation and its effect on the domestic U.S. economy are really a bigger concern now that we have a more aggressive stance coming out of Washington. And that being said, the stagflation issue is rearing its head. And stagflation is quite simply a stagnant or if not rising, a stable inflation rate, but a declining economic base. And
the news starts now. More fallout from that contentious meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Trump has now ordered his administration to pause military aid to Ukraine. Thomas Eyelikeness for more.
According to a White House official, the suspension of military help is immediate. The official says the U.S. is pausing and reviewing aid to ensure it's contributing to a solution. According to Bloomberg and Fox News reports, the pause will last until Trump determines Ukraine's leaders demonstrate what he calls a good faith commitment to peace. During the Oval Office dust-up last Friday, Trump pushed Zelensky to accept a ceasefire but would not provide any security guarantees to prevent Russia from breaking the agreement. Trump got offended when Zelensky suggested Russian President Vladimir Putin cannot be trusted. He called Zelensky disrespectful and ungrateful to America for its help. And he continued with that theme on Monday.
Well, I just think he should be more appreciative because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us.
It appears Trump is trying to back Ukraine into a corner with this pause, forcing Kyiv to take a deal that could leave it defenseless against Russia. Trump also addressed Zelensky's statement that the war could go on for a long time.
President Zelensky supposedly made a statement today in AP. I'm not a big fan of AP, so maybe it was an incorrect statement, but he said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time. And he better not be right about that.
Trump posted on Truth Social that he's running out of patience and America will not put up with Zelensky's defiance much longer. But that's unlikely to change Zelensky's mind. The Ukrainian president says there can be no peace agreement without security guarantees.
The lack of security guarantees for Ukraine 11 years ago allowed Russia to begin with the occupation of Crimea and the war in Donbass. Later, the absence of security guarantees enabled Russia to launch a full-scale invasion. And now, due to the lack of clear security guarantees, Russia is keeping this war ongoing. The whole world sees this, and the whole world acknowledges it.
Zelensky says Ukraine is working with its European allies on a deal that includes security for Kyiv, and he says that agreement will bring peace closer. Back in Washington, Democratic lawmakers are condemning the decision to pause funding. They call it reckless, indefensible, and a direct threat to America's security. In his haste to end the war in Ukraine, Trump has clearly come down on the side of Russia, and that has European allies of the U.S. worried. They fear Moscow will take a more aggressive stance, threatening the security of EU nations. Thomas Eyelikeness, NET25 World News.
The U.S. has paused military aid to Ukraine, a decision that could have significant consequences for Kyiv's ability to defend itself against Russian aggression. Historian and supply chain expert Marco Duranti says the move could have far-reaching implications for Ukraine.
Implications are extraordinary because the U.S. gives almost half of the total aid that has been given to Ukraine, slightly less than what Europe, including the European Union institutions, have given to the country. A lot of the aid that Europe has given, as with the U.S., has been financial and humanitarian. We look at military spending alone, the U.S. has given twice the amount that the Europeans have, in addition to critical intelligence assistance as well. So the impact would be enormous on Ukraine. I don't see any scenario in which Zelensky is going to be able to stand on his current position without making some concessions to the Americans.
Durante also suggests this decision may not have been made on a whim, but was likely part of a broader discussions with the Trump administration.
Yeah, I think the meeting gave cover to the Trump administration to suspend aid. I think it's inconceivable that there were not talks within the administration regarding this possibility between top security officials and defense officials. Something like this doesn't just occur out of the blue.
The pause in aid is also being viewed as a win for Russian President Vladimir Putin.
I think it's absolutely a win for Putin. This is something that Putin could only have dreamed of even just a week or a month ago. We've seen events hurl forward at a shocking speed, and Putin has so far gotten everything he could have wanted.
In Europe, leaders may rally around Ukraine in solidarity in the short term, but Durante warns of potential long-term challenges.
In the short run, I believe this will bring European leaders together and will bring the leaders of Western Europe together with those of Central and Eastern Europe in solidarity and in support of Ukraine. I think in the long run, we have to consider the internal dynamics within European countries and the positions of populist parties on the far right and the far left, who are already voicing skepticism, if not outright opposition, to additional aid to Ukraine, and think about the possibility of growing support for these parties, particularly given the financial burden.
As for peace negotiations, Durante questions whose terms they will favor.
Well, it's a question of peace on whose terms. If it's peace on Putin's terms, we're a lot closer to that outcome. If it's peace on the terms of the Ukrainians or the Europeans, we're a lot farther from that outcome.
This pause in aid raises broader questions about U.S. foreign policy and its long-term objectives in Europe.
I think one question is whether Donald Trump is out to destroy the European Union. This is something that has been suggested within the European press and apparently is a subject of discussion behind closed doors in Europe. And Trump has described the European Union as having been invented in order to undermine the United States. He used a lot more vulgar language than that. So we have to consider what Trump's long-term objectives are. We know that J.D. Vance has already suggested, a real withdrawal of support for Ukraine. Elon Musk has just announced that he was in favor of the U.S. withdrawing from NATO. But there's this question of what's going to happen to the European Union and the support that the Trump administration, or at least figures around the administration, are given to these far-right populist parties.
With no clear timeline for resuming aid, Ukraine faces mounting uncertainty as it continues its fight against Russian forces.
We
will continue to work with the U.S., with the U.S. Congress, with President Trump's administration, with President Trump, through all available diplomatic channels in a calm manner, in order for Ukraine and the U.S. to continue our fight for fair, long-lasting, stable peace in Ukraine and on the European continent.
Стабільний мир в Україні, на європейському континенті. Звісно ж, ми розраховуємо на підтримку Сполучених Штатів, оскільки...
Of course, we count on the U.S. support, because the significant amount of support including intelligence exchange and the important element air defense, the protection of our skies, cities, civil infrastructure, Ukrainian civilians. This is U.S. contribution. These are important elements that had saved thousands, maybe tens of thousands, of Ukrainian lives, both civilian and military. We, I repeat, are thankful to the Americans, to the American nation. We are ready to sign the minerals deal that is prepared about the creation of the investment fund to start working with the U.S. on an absolutely pragmatic economic base.
абсолютно на прагматичній економічній основі.
Democratic lawmakers are pressing the Pentagon for answers after reports surfaced that offensive U.S. cyber operations against Russia have been paused. Now, the move ordered by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth comes as the Trump administration pursues negotiations to end the war in Ukraine, a conflict that has strained global relations.
Our allies will also watch in horror as Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth make America less safe. It's the world less safe. There's no other way you can look at it when they give Putin a free pass to launch cyber attacks against the U.S. while we disarm our own cyber operations against Russia. Can you believe that? Letting Putin attack us, and we're saying we won't attack him in terms of cyber warfare. What is going on? The world's turned inside out and upside down, all to the detriment of the safety and security of America and its people. Tomorrow, as Donald Trump addresses our nation, our Western allies will wonder about the future of NATO. So these are difficult and dangerous times, and Donald Trump is taking America, our democracy, and the world down a dark and deeply troubling path.
During sensitive diplomatic talks, this particular pause has sparked debate. Some argue it's a tactical move to avoid derailing negotiations, while others worry it might compromise national security by reducing pressure on Russian cyber activities. President Trump is doubling down on his tariff threats, leaving no room for Canada or Mexico to avoid steep new trade penalties. Now, starting today, a 25% tariff on imports from both countries is officially in effect as the administration pushes for tougher action on border security and drug control. The looming deadline sent shockwaves through financial markets, with the Dow plunging nearly 650 points and the S&P 500 seeing its worst losses since December. And Trump isn't stopping there. He's also signaling plans for more reciprocal tariffs starting next month. For now, Canada and Mexico are bracing for the economic fallout, while businesses and consumers prepare for higher prices and potential disruptions. Take a look.
Fresh trade wars kicked off Tuesday between the U.S. and its top three trading partners, Canada, Mexico, and China, with new steep tariffs from Washington taking effect and triggering retaliation. On Monday night, U.S. President Donald Trump accused all three targeted countries of failing to stop the flow of fentanyl into the U.S. Just after midnight on the U.S. East Coast, Canadian and Mexican goods were hit with tariffs of 25%.
On the tariffs, is there any room left for Canada and Mexico to make a deal before midnight?
No room left for Mexico or for Canada. No, the tariffs, they're all set. They go into effect tomorrow.
And Trump's new tariffs on Chinese goods were doubled by an extra 10% to a cumulative 20%. Those new tariffs will apply to some major consumer electronics imported by the U.S., previously untouched by prior duties, including laptops, video game consoles, and Bluetooth devices. On Tuesday, China announced its own tariffs of 10 to 15%, mostly targeting U.S. agriculture like soybeans, meat, and cotton, and added new export restrictions for designated U.S. entities. Speaking to reporters Tuesday, a Chinese parliamentary spokesperson said China was willing to resolve U.S. concerns through consultation and dialogue, but will not accept threats and oppression. Meanwhile, U.S. tariffs on goods from Mexico and Canada will likely cause deeper repercussions for the highly integrated North American economy. Canada and Mexico have for decades enjoyed a virtually tariff-free trading relationship with the U.S. After Trump confirmed tariffs would proceed, financial markets reeled and global stocks tumbled. Both the Canadian dollar and Mexican peso fell against the U.S. dollar. Automaker shares fell sharply, especially for major firms General Motors and Ford, who have production lines in Mexico. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said on Monday Ottawa would hit back with 25% tariffs on up to about $107 billion worth of U.S. goods. Mexico's economy ministry said President Claudia Sheinbaum is expected to announce her response Tuesday. On Tuesday, markets responded to the news with stocks falling and bond yields sliding across Asia and Japan's Nikkei closing down 1.2%. Trump's America First agenda, aimed at redrawing trade relationships in favor of the U.S., is expected to be a centerpiece of his Tuesday night address to a joint session of Congress.
Tariffs imposed by former U.S. President Donald Trump are sparking concerns about a potential economic slowdown. Chris Brigatti, Chief Investment Officer at SWBC, warns that these tariffs could lead to a challenging scenario known as stagflation. Here, prices rise, but economic growth stalls. Take a look.
I think the tariff scenario is definitively an inflationary aspect to what can happen within the economy and the market. But broadly speaking, I don't think we've really gotten to the point where the Fed has completed their task, and they'll admit that themselves. So to the point where we need to see continued decline in the inflation picture, we need more things to happen for the economy to feel robust enough to be able to weather any storms. Right now, what I'm seeing is and hearing is a little bit of a stagflation concern. Slowing growth with a stable or increasing inflationary environment, that's really not a robust situation, and should be really careful as a consumer, as a market participant, to be wary of things that could really negatively affect portfolios as a result of a stagflationary environment.
China today swiftly retaliated against fresh U.S. tariffs, announcing 10 to 15% hikes to import levies, covering a range of American agricultural and food products, moving the world's top two economies a step closer toward an all-out trade war. Take a look. After Donald Trump imposed sweeping tariffs on Chinese imports, Beijing has announced its own tariffs on American agricultural and food products, ranging from 10 to 15%. This move brings the world's two largest economies closer to a full-blown trade war. A Chinese parliamentary spokesperson made it clear that while they're open to talking things out, they won't back down in the face of threats or pressure.
Trade between nations should be conducted in accordance with the rules of the World Trade Organization, and trade disputes should also be resolved within the WTO framework. The unilateral imposition of tariffs by the U.S. violates WTO rules and disrupts the security and stability of global industrial and supply chains. We hope that the U.S. will work with China in the same direction and find solutions through equal consultations. China is willing to strengthen cooperation with countries around the world to jointly safeguard the hard-won multilateral trading system, oppose unilateralism and protectionism, and work together to promote inclusive and beneficial economic globalization.
China has also put 25 U.S. companies on notice, restricting their imports and investments due to national security concerns. 10 of these firms were specifically targeted for selling arms to Taiwan, which China claims as its own territory. Interestingly, Beijing chose not to go after big-name U.S. brands this time around. The situation is tense, with both sides digging in and the global economy watching nervously. The global trade landscape is shifting rapidly as China retaliates against fresh U.S. tariffs, escalating tensions between the two economic superpowers. Take a look. Beijing announced 10 to 15% tariff hikes on American agricultural and food products, including soybeans, pork, and beef, and placed 25 U.S. firms under export and investment restrictions on national security grounds. Supply chain expert Cameron Johnson says these developments signal a dramatic change in the global order.
So the world order of yesterday is not the world order of today. With U.S. actions, particularly with tariffs against China and the challenges with Ukraine, what we're seeing is actually a fundamental shift into a new order. We don't really understand what that is at the moment. For example, Europe is going to try to get closer to China and other U.S. allies such as Japan and Australia. China is also going to try to get closer to those allies by offering its markets, but also products. And so we don't know how exactly the strategy is moving forward. I think one of the important things to realize is, though, what we assumed was a global order, both on economics and great power competition, has completely changed in today's world.
Johnson also noted that countries like Europe, Japan, and Australia are recalibrating their strategies to strengthen ties with both the U.S. and China. China's response follows President Trump's to double tariffs on Chinese goods from 10 to 20%, with plans for further increases to 60%. Now, Johnson explains that while some companies may start considering supply chain shifts at higher tariff levels, the impact remains uncertain for now.
We're still on track to 60%. At the moment, with 20%, it just barely moves the needle for companies wanting to move potential supply chains out of the country. At 35%, we start to see that companies will start to move or consider other strategies moving forward. We still don't know exactly how that response will look like, but companies such as Apple, for example, will have limited options just because of the mass scale production they have here.
Despite rising tensions, Johnson believes China is taking a calculated approach rather than overreacting.
We're in a kind of trade war. I think what the U.S. is trying to do is use tariffs to gain leverage, particularly over trading partners it sees as disadvantaging itself. But China is not overreacting. I think China is trying to take some time to understand exactly what's going on and also find ways to respond in kind, but without hurting its overall exports.
And a developing story out of the Carolinas, wildfires are wreaking havoc across the Carolinas with dry, windy conditions, fueling dozens of blazes that erupted over the weekend. Take a look. South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster has declared a state of emergency as firefighters battle more than 175 fires statewide, including a massive 1,600-acre blaze near Myrtle Beach. Evacuation orders were issued for several neighborhoods, though some residents have since been allowed to return home. In North Carolina, crews are working to contain multiple fires, including a 500-acre blaze in Polk County near the South Carolina border. Strong winds and critically dry conditions have made the fight especially challenging, with officials warning of elevated fire risks across the region. Despite the intensity of the fires, no injuries or structural losses have been reported so far. Firefighters continue to make progress, but with more than 200 wildfires reported across both states, it's a race against time to prevent further devastation. Thousands of residents in northeastern Japan have been forced to evacuate as the country battles its largest wildfire in decades near the city of Ofunatu. The fire, which started on February 26, has now spread across more than 2,600 hectares, fueled by record low rainfall and strong winds. Aerial footage shows thick white smoke and flames tearing through forested areas. Firefighters and military helicopters have been working around the clock, but water bombing operations are limited to daylight hours. And so far, over 4,500 people have been evacuated, with many homes destroyed.
We have received a donation from the Los Angeles Dodgers Roki Sasaki, Japanese baseball player, of 10 million yen, $67,020, in cash and 500 sets of bedding as a disaster relief.
Local teacher Marina Kawatari shared heartbreaking stories from students at an evacuation center, some of whom have lost everything.
Some students are very discouraged and heartbroken. One showed me a picture of their house burning down and said to me, "There's nothing left." Another said, "Even if I get into a high school, I don't know where I could stay for that."
Officials say this wildfire surpasses the previous record set in 1992, highlighting the growing risks of extreme weather linked to climate change. Taiwan's Defense Minister Wellington Koo is reassuring that the U.S. won't abandon the Indo-Pacific, calling it a core national interest. Now, this comes amid concerns about U.S. commitment to Taiwan following a tense meeting between President Trump and Ukraine's President Zelensky. Take a look.
Maintaining the status quo and peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait is a consensus we have with the United States. We have a common goal. We have a common goal. We are using deterrence and strength to achieve peace. So we believe that from this perspective, I believe the U.S. will not give up, will not give up the Indo-Pacific region. It will not want any war to happen in the Indo-Pacific either and cause it to lose the Indo-Pacific region and suffer such a significant loss. From an economic point of view, as what was just mentioned, and judging from Taiwan's geopolitical and strategic position and the military security preparations required for the United States, I do not think the United States can afford to lose the Indo-Pacific.
And the news continues here on NET25. We'll be right back. President Donald Trump, joined by TSMC CEO C.C. Wei, unveiled a groundbreaking $100 billion investment to build 5 new semiconductor manufacturing facilities in Arizona. The announcement made at the White House marks the largest foreign direct investment in U.S. history and is expected to create thousands of high-paying jobs. Trump emphasized the importance of reducing reliance on imported chips, calling the move vital for national security and economic growth. Take a look.
Donald Trump says chip giant TSMC has agreed to invest $100 billion in building 5 new facilities in the U.S. He made the announcement Monday, standing alongside the boss of the Taiwan firm, C.C. Wei.
This $100 billion in new investment will go into building 5 cutting-edge fabrication facilities in the great state that we just discussed, Arizona, and will create thousands of jobs, many thousands of jobs, and they're high-paying jobs. In total, today's announcement brings Taiwan semiconductor investments to about $165 billion they've started already.
TSMC is the world's largest contract chip maker and a supplier to major US firms like NVIDIA. It already has facilities in Arizona and says the new plan will create 40,000 construction jobs over the next 4 years. The company didn't give a detailed timeline for the investments. Trump said the deal was vital to making the US less reliant on imported chips.
We must be able to build the chips and semiconductors that we need right here in American factories with American skill and American labor. And that's exactly what we're doing. As you know, Taiwan pretty much has a monopoly on that market. And I think pretty much is not a term that's even appropriate. They do have a monopoly. And this is a tremendous move by the most powerful company in the world.
For Trump, the announcement is meant to show he is fulfilling election pledges to create jobs and support industry. It follows a string of similar announcements, including a promise by Apple to invest $500 billion in the US over 4 years. Now TSMC might also have a hand in saving troubled US rival Intel. Trump administration officials say they have spoken to the firm about taking a stake in the US chipmaker's factory unit. On Monday, TSMC would only say that it looked forward to discussing ways to bolster the technology industry. Shares in the firm fell around 2% in early trade Tuesday following the previous day's news.
Amsterdam's Van Gogh Museum and Lego have unveiled a unique collaboration, a brick-built rendition of Van Gogh's iconic Sunflowers painting. This 2,615-piece set allows fans to recreate the masterpiece at home, complete with adjustable sunflower petals.
The great thing is that people can actually build it themselves and kind of build up a composition in a way that a painter builds up a composition, and in that way I think they will engage very directly with the life story and the work of Vincent van Gogh as an artist, and with this very special painting in our collection.
Lego designer Steen worked closely with the museum to bring this vision to life.
I think what was the most challenging, but also one of the most exciting parts of this project, I think, was definitely trying to find the right balance in colors. Our Lego color palette is relatively limited. It was really not trying to find exactly the right color match, but more so the overarching theme of colors and the right balance between all the colors.
The Lego Sunflowers is now available, bringing a piece of art history into homes around the world. And with that, we end tonight's broadcast. For everyone here on NET25, I'm Alma Angeles. Thank you for joining us. Good night.